All right, everyone. This is Mark and Kyle, and we are back for another episode of the Weekly SITREP. Today is April 25th. This will be publishing on April 26th, and we have a whole awesome slew of stuff to talk to you about today. So, for anyone new to the show, Kyle and I get together a week and we talk about what has happened in the past week in the world of business and politics, all in an effort to help you if you were thinking about, what you want to do for life after the military, to help you kind of understand like what that civilian operating environment is like, to give you some insights on different industries, different businesses that are out there, to maybe help you make a career decision, or just feed you with information they can take into an interview or job hunt, whatever it is. So first, I want to start off. We hit a pretty big milestone the last couple of days. So on Friday, I got a notification that we eclipsed 10,000 downloads. I'm pretty freaking stoked about it. I'm not gonna lie to you. That was my goal for by the end of 2021 was to hit that, and it's end of April, and we just did it. Definitely been like a huge boost in people checking out the podcast and everything. Like since Kyle and I partnered together, and I know both he and I absolutely love doing this show. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's listened and checked it out, and also gotten a bunch of great reviews in the last week. So appreciate everyone who's dropped a review in there as well.
Yeah, no, super awesome. I'm really glad to see this thing start to take off. I think it's a valuable platform, and yeah, let's keep it going, guys. Spread the word.
Heck yeah. Okay. So every week we start off first with the military update. So this is stuff related to defense and security because we're vets and we still care about these things. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is U.S. Air Force and pilot retention. Now, I know I have not been like intimately involved in this story in any significant way, just because I'm neither a pilot nor was in the Air Force. But I know I have seen these headlines for a number of years, and
Yeah.
that the Air Force has been struggling big time with pilot retention. And there's a few things in this article that we're looking at that I think are worth drawing out. And excuse me, one huge problem the Air Force has with pilots is versus, I was a former infantryman, and like when you're getting out as an infantryman, there's not necessarily a whole lot of like directly translatable jobs that you can transfer right into, right? You have to do some level of like translation of, what you did into civilian speak. But, if you flew C-130s in the Air Force, I mean, that's pretty much the exact same thing, I imagine, as flying, a 737 for Delta, right? And so you can pretty much step right out of that. I'm sure there's probably some certification or something you got to get, I don't know. And then step right into, a corporate job as being like an airline flight, airline pilot or whatever. And the other problem they're running into, there was a stat in here saying that even though, a lot of these pilots are exiting into, even when they were exiting into like a bad economy, even when they were exiting into, a bad job market, they still were exiting because they were like, the work-life balance sucks. This is tough on my family. And like I can do, and also I'm doing a lot of other things other than flying, which is what I want to do. And I just want to fly. So just let me fly.
Just let me fly, man.
Yeah, just let me fly. I'm a peacock captain. You gotta let me fly.
Yeah, they this is funny, right? Because the Air Force or in Army aviation, right? There's always this talk, especially among the commissioned officers, of which, I used to be one. And it's like, in the Air Force, all they do is fly, and in the Navy, all they do is fly. This is, bullshit. We have to like the warrants or the blah, blah, like the warrants are the pilots here and we're just the managers, which is
Right.
true. But there's actually a lot of BS Air Force pilots put up with. They have a ton of additional duties, right? The kind of the bane of existence of anybody who's technically skilled, right? And thought they were signing up to just be a pilot. And they are in demand as well. Pilots are very much in demand. The Air Force has all sorts of different missions that they have to do, and they are a method of power projection. So they really place a lot of demands on their folks. And there's actually a little backstory to this, right? So before COVID, right? There's a huge demand for airline pilots, and not just airline pilots, but also transport pilots, right, to fly packages around. And part of that was because Congress raised the retirement age back to 65 back in 2007. And they also raised the hour requirements for first officers to something like over 1,000 hours, because there was a very tragic crash of a turboprop passenger aircraft that killed a bunch of people over Buffalo several years back, and they cited the first officer's lack of experience as basically the main factor.
Right.
And so what that forced the airlines to do, right, is they have all these, pilots that, even from like the Vietnam era. Now it's 2021, right? So we're kind of really phasing out past that. But they had all these pilots who just were, hey, we're going to keep going till 65, right? And it was all these old pilots from the Air Force and the Navy. But there was a provision that they put in for the hour limit they raised for the first officers. And they said if you had military training, that hour limit would be reduced. So airlines had a huge incentive to pull from military ranks, and not only military ranks of like fixed wing pilots, like Air Force pilots, but also rotary wing. So there's a huge
interesting. Okay.
There's a bunch of former Army guys I know who are pushing heavy metal through the national airspace now and got their type transitions. So it's interesting to see that this huge demand for air travel, right? And so what this article is talking about is the Air Force has had a ton of trouble retaining pilots, right? For the exact reasons talk, poor culture, the culture, right? Culture is so important in an organization. It drives people away if it's not good. And so the Air Force has a deficit of more than 2,000 pilots, requiring $15 billion to train replacements. And basically what this article is saying is the Air Force was thinking about, trying to address culture issues, try to address retention, issues by fixing culture, et cetera. And then the pandemic happened and they said, you know what, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to because airlines aren't hiring as much, we're just going to have these retention bonuses still because they still need to retain people, but we're going to raise the number of years that you have to basically sign. It used to be like as little as 3 years to now it's something like 7. And they get huge paychecks. They get like an extra 35 grand a year for these retention bonuses, right? Pilots could be making like $400,000, right? Over the course of their contract. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Pilots are super expensive. They take forever to train.
Yeah.
And it isn't just the training, it's the seasoning portion. So
yeah.
But basically this article is making the argument that, hey, airlines are going to come roaring back. Packages are going to come roaring back. Package shipping, right? It already is, right? That, e-commerce is super hot right now. That requires aircraft to transport stuff. So they're just saying that the Air Force is just they're going to be right back where they started prior to the pandemic. And they just refuse to address any of the actual issues that are driving people away. Because you can throw money at people, but if it's a bad quality of life, people will leave. And why the Rand Corps, who continues to do all these studies for them, can't figure that out is beyond me. Or maybe they tell the Air Force and the Air Force doesn't care.
Yeah. I mean, if you're throwing a whole bunch of money at me, but I'm stuck in, I don't know, some remote airbase in Nevada or something, and like I never see my wife and kids. Yeah. Leaving and maybe taking a pay cut and going to like a regular hours-ish job flying for a corporate airline. Yeah, it sounds kind of better.
Well, they just throw so much nonsense at pilots, right? In military aviation with like the flight planning and all the safety, which, there's there for like good reason. But and if you fly for the airlines, right, or the, corporate, like people, you show up, they give you your flight plan, everything's filed. It's like, go fly the jet, monkey. And you're like, you got it. And that's it. And there's just none of the extra BS. It's really refreshing, from what I hear.
I'm sure they don't do staff duty hours either, which is super nice. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay. So the next story we're going to move into. So last week we talked about the announcement that the U.S. has been pulling out of Afghanistan in 9/11. I'll be so bold as to say that I think Kyle and I broke the story. We were the first ones to talk about it. No one else ever brought it up ever. It was just us. However, it's being talked about in the news by other people as well. But what we're looking at right now is that Secretary Austin has ordered aircraft carrier and bombers to go and guard the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. So basically just put in some extra air cover over top Afghanistan as troops are, pulling out of bases and FOBs all in effort to ensure that, we don't have any crazy attacks by the Taliban as we're trying to get out of Dodge. And it's, this is looking like an actionable step towards pulling out of Afghanistan. I'm still going to be, I think our general stance for Kyle and I both is we're not going to believe it until September 12th when there's no one left.
Yeah.
But this is actually like an actionable step of, okay, we're actually putting pieces in place now to remove people from Afghanistan.
When you were going through your officer training, Mark, in college and then in IBOLIC, and then I'm sure at your unit, what was the one operation everybody always said, well, this is the toughest operation you can conduct?
Dude, retrograde, getting
Yeah,
out.
the
Yeah.
retrograde. And why is that, right? Because you are actively trying to leave an area that is not safe, and you have to remove all the equipment, right? Remove all the personnel, do it in a responsible manner, and try to avoid getting shot while doing it, right? Because nobody wants to see U.S. troops like limping out of Afghanistan with the Taliban like at their
Right.
back with
Right.
AK-47s, which is very much what happened to the Russians. Uh, you've never been to Afghanistan, right, Mark?
No,
Like,
no, never did Afghanistan
okay,
tour.
so here's what's if you go around Afghanistan, right, for the glorious 11 months that I spent there, close to a year, they have all these forward airstrips everywhere that the Russians left, right? And I saw this because I flew around a good portion of the eastern part of the country, and it is literally tanks and towed and self-propelled artillery, all this stuff like lined up in a neat row with a little airstrip next to it. And the Russians couldn't leave. The Russians couldn't take it. It's like we're just going to leave a 65-ton tank here. Like what are they like
Yeah.
throw a thermite grenade in the engine block,
Yeah.
and it's going to be there for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And there's like aircraft, like you'll see like aircraft just like piled on top of each other. They've been stripped of everything that's useful, and so this is like a really tough thing to do. And I kind of first got wind of this as reading Twitter, and I saw some stuff, and they're saying that, hey, they're going to deploy a Ranger task force to Afghanistan along with these aircraft carriers to basically provide security and space for the US to do this, right?
Right.
So you're going to have all these units retrograding, and you're going to have some I'm sure Ranger Regiment is just like salivating over this opportunity to
Oh yeah.
to do this. But they're going to be there providing some kinetic security. But the Taliban would love to see the U.S. run out of here with our tail between our
Yeah.
legs. And
Everyone's worried about the Saigon embassy shot of like, the last Marine stepping into the helicopter. And like, that's like the last image everyone has of Vietnam. And everyone is like, let's just not have that happen in Kabul. Please, 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 please don't let that happen. But like the Taliban definitely wants that to happen. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll continue to talk on this story because it's obviously a big thing, but yeah, I'll be interested to see what are going to be the other steps that are put in place to actually start retrograding forces out of Afghanistan and not just necessarily drawing troops down.
Yeah, they're pretty retrograded actually. If you think of, so like when I was there versus when my buddies have gone back, or
Right.
people that I've known, recently, they're like, there's nothing. The infrastructure that you saw when you were there is completely dismantled, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it's not as much of a lift, but I'm sure it's still going to be monumentally difficult, more than I could imagine.
Right. Right. All right, everyone. That wraps up the defense and security portion of the show. And this is where we move to the Civi SITREP. So we're talking about what is going on in the civilian world that's just important for you to know about as you're, entering the job market or trying to think about what you want to do after the military, or, applying to schools or job interviews, whatever it is. So the first story we're looking at is titled Automation Software Maker UiPath Shares Rise 23% in Market Debut. Okay, so this is a company it's mostly focused on robotic automation, which I always find kind of super fascinating. So
robotic process automation is the term.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you fill me in then on like what the difference in?
Yeah, so UiPath. I actually used UiPath in my last job.
I said UiPath. It's UiPath.
Yeah, before I switched to my current role. Maybe I'll end up using UiPath again. It's a really cool software piece of software, right? And what it essentially allows you to do is to program bots to do repeatable tasks on your computer, right? And like the use case that I've seen, or that was like demonstrated to us when I was first learning how to do it, was say you wanted to read an Excel file, right? and you wanted to fill out, and the Excel file had like a bunch of names and socials and everything, and you wanted to fill out a bunch of tax forms for a client that you're helping them with some sort of, big corporate thing like a merger or something.
Right.
And so to do this by hand would take forever. Say you want to do it like 10,000 people, right?
Yeah.
Like it would be a literal nightmare to do. But what you can do is you could take this UiPath program and you have it on your computer, and you basically like tell it what to do. Like and there's like a little like programming light that you have to do.
Sure.
And, like loops and stuff. And hey, I want you to take this cell and put it in here and then like save the file, etc.
Right.
And then you can even like email it. But you can do that and then you just let it run. It does it. It's crazy. And so this, this like bot is doing your bidding right in your computer for some like heavily like manual, repetitive laborious tasks that some human, it's not a good use of a person's time to do. And they'll probably mess up anyway, because, if you do something 10,000 times, over and over, you're going to get sloppy. It's human nature.
Right.
And so this is obviously really valuable to a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the value prop there, and it can do so much more. It's really, really cool. You can put it on a cloud server, or excuse me, you can put it on like a virtual machine, right?
Yeah.
And program it to do a bunch of stuff. It's really valuable stuff, and it's something that when I think about, because these people are like, oh, I want to invest in crypto, I want to invest in X, Y, and Z. Like this is a company that is going to make a ton of money. And so like this is like,
I'm like seeing dollar signs right now for sure.
Yeah. So this is like something you'd actually want to invest in. It's really, really cool. And so, yeah. And what the article is saying is that they IPO'd last week and they raised 23% in their market debut, reaching a valuation of 36 billion, right? And so valuation would be number of shares outstanding times stock price. And that's going to be, that's the valuation put in enterprise value and add debt. But yeah, so really, really cool stuff.
I think okay, I'll be totally honest. When I first read this, I was thinking like robots, because I'm an idiot when I was reading over this article. But I'm super glad you explained all this, because I think the possibility of providing automation tools that don't require like intensive coding solutions to a lot of like office workers has just enormous potential. Because right, like I mean, you can be like a manager in some type of whatever, right? And if you have the ability to like, like your team does some type of task all the time, and you can come up with like a, via just like a little bit of technical expertise, some type of automated solution that just streamlines that entire thing, reduces waste, makes it more efficient, cuts out on error and all that. I mean, that's hugely, hugely valuable. I took a course. There's like a local nonprofit here in Charlottesville that teaches some tech stuff, and it's kind of mostly focused towards the undergrads here at UVA and like getting them jobs into tech. But they do some like really cool evening tech courses. And I did a no code course with them, and it was all about like, here's kind of a suite of no code stuff out there that lets you automate stuff and like build apps or like websites or anything without having to know any coding. If you're interested in any of this, on my website, I put all like the resources they share with me. So just look up no code and you'll see there's like a giant list of everything on there in the veteranpro.com. Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Yeah, they called this at my last firm digital upskilling.
Yeah.
Which if you know anything about my last firm, will easily identify it to whoever is listening. And so they would put people through a digital academy for this, right? And they would say, hey, so they would teach you how to use Tableau, Alteryx, which is Tableau is a data visualization tool. You can also do some data analysis as well. It can like join like data and stuff. Alteryx, which is what we call an extract, transform, and load tool. Imagine it's like SQL but democratized, right? So it allows you to query databases and do. It allows you to do a lot of things you do in Excel, but you can build out like this workflow, this visual workflow, and tell it to do all sorts of stuff. And then UiPath as well, right? And so the idea was that, hey, we're gonna, these are almost no code solutions, right? Like you were talking about, Mark. And so we're gonna give this to all of our staff, and then we're gonna tell them, hey, we want you to try to implement these on projects, and we want to see how much time we can save. Because if we can have, They didn't call it a workforce displacement, which would be the polite way of saying we want to replace you with software. It was we want to be able to sell more work, which is
Right.
really what I think technology allows you to do. Because
Yeah.
if before you had 3 people, now you can have 2 people do it. You know, you can use that other person to sell more work. There's more work to be sold. You just got to
Right.
have like the right people,
Right.
right? So this is something that helps. It's a force multiplier, is what it is.
Oh,
So
great term there.
yeah, I know. Really, really cool stuff, and something that I will be following as they continue to report quarterly earnings now, because their pre-prospect or their pre-IPO, when they were showing their financials, were uh, was it the company reported revenue of 607 million for the year ending in January, up 81% from the previous year. It also became free cash flow positive in the most recent year. So if
Oh,
you were an
damn.
investor and you were listening to that, like,
You're just like salivating right now.
yeah. So, and
Yeah.
they've got huge customers. They got Bank of America, CVS, Toyota, Ericsson, CrowdStrike. Like these guys. Like, this is a company you'd want to
Right.
invest in,
Right.
or you can invest in Cumrocket, that shit
Yes.
coin
Go
that
all in on Come Rocket, everyone. All in on Come
which
Rocket.
it just further undermines my I think further bolsters my argument that crypto is maybe
And
not
I
not
just learned
fully
about Come
mature.
Rocket yesterday, and then I went into the website this morning, and the only place you can buy it is an exchange called Pancake Swap, which is like, I love everything about it. I do. Like, I'm
I,
not. As a reminder, everyone, Kyle and I are not registered financial advisors. Don't listen to anything that we say as significant financial advice. Yada yada yada. All that
yeah,
stuff.
seriously.
Disclaimer complete. However, buying Come Rocket on Pancake Swap just sounds awesome.
It's I've the use case for it is it involved porn is what I've heard. You know what? God bless him. Whatever. Okay. Anyway, So
Okay.
that's
Okay.
my path. I think we can move on to the next.
Yeah. Which speaking of, since we're on the topic of Come Rocket, or excuse me, we're gonna get to, you know what? Let's go to the Bitcoin story now, just because since
Oh, sure.
we're on the crypto train for time being. Okay, so if you haven't seen this past week, Bitcoin and pretty much most of the crypto market has taken like a huge dive, and there's been a number of reasons for that, not the least of which there is some concern over, um, there's been some talk from people high up in the federal government dealing in economic matters that, there might be some type of regulation coming down the pipeline that would make it more difficult to use crypto, or increase the taxes on it, or whatever it may be. And so like that's kind of part of the reason. And really kind of like what we're looking at here in this particular article is kind of reminiscent of the GameStop issue of going on, where you had people who were, like lots of internet crazy people going and buying calls, so like betting on the rise in price of GameStop, and then you had a lot of big hedge funds that were shorting it, and basically like as the price kept going up, like those shorts kept getting like worse and worse and worse and worse, and it kind of creates a spiral effect that just kind of spins out of control. And that's a little bit of like what happened on Bitcoin as well. Like people were betting that it was going to go up, and then it kind of went down, and then it had like a reverse effect of spiraling out of control and just kind of screwing some people, and some who were betting for it to go the other way.
Yeah, well, this article talks about leverage, and I'll kind of explain that here in a second. But what are the numbers here? The numbers, right? So on April 17th, Bitcoin was trading almost at 62K, and then it crashed on April 18th. Oh man, it crashed down to a low of 54K, right? Or no, 53, 50, like 53K. So that's a 17% drop, with half the decline occurring in about 20 minutes, right? That would be fairly volatile, right? The stock market doesn't really move like that. Most
Right.
of the time, the stock market is moving up or down, by like about 1%, something
Right.
around that range, which is one reason why people, like to put their money in stocks, because it's generally a safe place to hold it. So yeah, so there were rumors, right, of Treasury regulating this, and then there's also been some other stuff going on across the world with, um, governments kind of not saying they're not exactly pleased with cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, and
And
I think
and
China too is talking about creating their own digital currency, which would potentially compete with Bitcoin.
yeah, right, yeah. So it's like, hey, if you can move money rapidly, right, at a low cost, right, Bitcoin's use case starts to starts to not be so strong. So okay. Yeah, so traders pointed to a rumor on Twitter that the Treasury Department was preparing to charge several financial institutions for allegedly using cryptocurrencies to launder money, which was picked up by some media outlets. A department spokeswoman declined to comment. She declined to comment, but note she didn't deny it. Something. So when you see stuff like that, that's something that you should raise your eyebrow. Declined, but did not deny. So, yeah, but so what really drove this, right, is there are when you do trading, right, it is possible to have a margin account. And what margin accounts allow you to do is essentially have a line of credit with a brokerage or an exchange, right? And so you say, hey, I'm going to front 10% of the money and you're going to like give me like 90% leverage. So if I'll give you $10 and then you can let me, with that $10, you can let me buy $100 worth of stuff, right? So 90 of it is leverage.
Right.
And as long as that price, right? So you can make a ton of money doing this, right? And people do it all the time. And you'll hear you'll hear a term out there called margin call. And what'll happen, right, is if so they're not doing this for like free, right? Like they want to have some backstop behind it. And so they take a look at your credit worthiness and they take a look at what assets you have. And basically an exchange or brokerage will say, okay, if we start to get into like negative territory here where your leverage is now turned against you, right? And so, hey, you even though you fronted $10, you wanted risk exposure of 100, and now that $100 is like negative. We're going to enact a margin call, and the margin call is going to be, well, you have to supply funds to cover this, right? Basically
Right.
saying like, hey, here's the money to cover this, right? Or we'll liquidate some of your holdings automatically to cover it, which could be very painful, right? Because maybe those holdings are also maybe those holdings also took a dive, right? And you could be exposed to like a bunch of tax consequences and
Right.
everything. So that is part of what drove this, right? And you had all these overseas crypto exchanges that give huge amounts of leverage. I think the number that I saw was something pretty crazy. What was it? Yeah. At Binance, okay, offshore crypto derivative exchanges offer individual investors high degrees of leverage. At Binance, for instance, investors can get leverage of 125 to 1 for some future contracts, right? So, meaning they can deposit just 80 cents to amass the equivalent of $100 of Bitcoin. That is insane, right?
That's
because
insane.
Bitcoin is already highly speculative. It's very volatile. So
Yeah.
you're saying like, not only do I want exposure to a really volatile asset,
Yeah.
I want to get leveraged out the ass for it.
Yeah.
And so you better have some sort of hedge or risk management to basically get you out of this trade, right? It's easy to get into a trade. To get out of a trade, not so easy. You need to have an exit strategy. And they had one guy here. What's the Jassim, an engineer in Kuwait who declined to give his last name, said he was awakened by an alert on his phone about 5 a.m. local time Sunday. He watched anxiously as Binance liquidated some of his trades, and then he closed out others with steep losses. And all he said, he lost about $9,000. And here's the other thing: crypto exchanges don't close, right? The stock
Right.
market
Yeah.
closes on the weekend.
Crypto's
You get
24 hours.
sunburned. So instead, you're now like you're like a crack addict, right? You got to constantly like monitor your phone, like what's going on with crypto, like that. Yeah, I'm sorry, like this is just ridiculous, right? And so all these people are getting screwed with huge margin calls and using leverage, right, to buy a highly volatile asset. I mean, I think it just shows like the risks of dealing with crypto, and people will be like, oh, why do you not like crypto? Why do you, and like I'm saying, like I don't like hate crypto. You can make money with it, like. You just got to know, like, there's a ton of risk. Like, this is not like everybody's like all the fucking laser eyes on Twitter that are, calling me an idiot for thinking this is stupid, being like, dude, like, there's a lot of risk here, and people should just be aware of it.
Yeah. My stance on on crypto and everything has always been, I am not as like bearish as you are. Is that like, first, make sure like the rest of your financial house is in order. Like, have your emergency savings going on, be contributing money to, like, your kid's college fund, paying off the mortgage, put money to your 401k, your TSP, your IRA, whatever it is. Like, get all those, get that good foundation set. And if you have some extra money, I think it is not a bad idea to have like some limited exposure. Okay. Just because I think, if you want to create huge wealth, like, you have to take some level of risk, and some of that, any invest. So that's why you see like institutional investors and everything putting some money into crypto. The majority of their portfolio is in like S&P 500, kind of like, standard stock market kind of stuff, but they're putting like limited exposure in there because they're seeking those like big gains. But they also have everything else in order, so they can take a hit, and that's why they're not putting huge numbers in there. But
to be fair, like, I am not like a total bear in crypto, right? I acknowledge that you can make money off of it. You make quite a bit of money off of it, right?
Yeah.
You got a Bitcoin at like $5,000, which I could have done back in business school, and I didn't because I thought it was dumb back then. I would have made a ton of money. But that, like Mark said, right? You shouldn't go all in unless you can afford to lose the money, right? If you want, say, a small amount of exposure to this, right? Because you do need volatility to make gains to build wealth, right? That's one reason why you tell people to get into the S&P 500 is like, hey, it's relatively volatile. You can make a lot of gains in it. You'll suffer some losses too, but over the long term,
it goes up and up and up and up.
Yeah, you'll make money, right? And and so if you have some exposure to cryptocurrency with a well-diversified portfolio, you have the possibility to make quite a bit of money. But just if you go all in, like, you're really opening yourself up to quite a bit of risk.
Yeah. I actually had, I don't want to give away too much information about this person. I was speaking with a fan of the show recently who told me that in like 2017, he put like 100K into Bitcoin. And I was like, holy shit, man.
Yeah. I mean, you could make a ton of money.
Yeah.
You could make a ton of money. Right? And it's,
but that's a ride. That's a ride. You gotta be ready to ride those rapids.
If you think your mental health can survive that, right?
Yeah. That's huge.
If you put your life savings into a cryptocurrency, you're going to watch it every single second.
Like, I think that's a bananas. Really important. I have a close family member who is very, very involved in software and tech stuff, and was in on Bitcoin like early. I'm talking like 2013 timeframe or something, when it was like, fractions of a cent.
Yeah.
And one of his close friends ended up making tens of millions of dollars on Bitcoin. Okay.
Yeah.
But for the exact reasons that you just talked about, he was like, dude, I was just like so volatile, and I was sweating it, and like just checking my phone all the time and looking at it, and I cashed it out. And he's like, you know what? Like, yeah, did I miss out on some like huge gains? He's like, absolutely. But to me, it wasn't worth the stress and anxiety that came from looking at it and just like feeling that like, what's going to happen here? Yeah. That's a really important thing to talk about. And as you look at like your whatever you're doing with your money, like, how is this doing for, like, affecting me personally?
Yeah. I think I saw somewhere, if you had invested in Amazon back when it first started, right, to now, you would have obviously,
made a ton of money,
multiplied your money hundreds of times over.
Right.
But the emotional ride you would have had to take would have been so severe.
Yeah.
Because Amazon has suffered huge losses, right? Huge drops in their stock price, right? Most people can't do it. Most people just are not able to do it because they don't have Warren Buffett money, right?
Yeah.
Like, Warren Buffett could stroke $1 million check into Bitcoin. That's walking around money for him.
Yeah.
He's not gonna be destitute.
That's a drop in the bucket.
if it goes wrong for him. But if the average person who YOLOs 100K into Bitcoin, it might take a while to recover from that if it goes against you. So
yeah. All right, y'all. Well, I think we're done talking about Rocket and Bitcoin and everything. So we're gonna transfer to our next topic here, and I'm glad you picked this one, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's titled "COVID-19 Case Studies Make Their Way into MBA Programs." Okay, or MBA curricula is the title. Excuse me. And I know I've had a number of cases this year where we've talked about COVID. I think we had an operations class. We talked about the difficulties of the supply chain when it came to masks, last April, May timeframe. We had ethics class talking about like what's the ethics behind, who gets vaccinated first and like how people get vaccinated and who gets access to vaccines. And I know we've had at least like one or two others. I'm kind of blanking on exactly what they were, but uh, I've been pleased that like Darden's found a way to kind of like interweave COVID stories and cases through our studies, because it's very timely, and it's good to see the programs are bringing this up, because there's a lot of stuff to be studied about in the business world of how COVID is impacting things.
Does Darden use HBS case studies, or do they make their own?
It's probably, if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably 85% Darden cases.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's kind of funny actually. So we have like the HBS cases are notoriously long. They're very 30, long. 40 pages or something like that. And our cases are usually, and I think also kind of from my knowledge, I think what HBS does is you pick like one case and you use that like one case like all week in like all of your classes or something. Right. Whereas like for us, it's every single class, every single day is a totally new case. So if you had to read a 40-page case every single day for every single class, like you just go batshit bonkers insane.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what case studies are real quick.
Right.
Since, I think a fair number of people listening to this might be interested in MBA programs.
Right.
So business school education, most of it derives, HBS is the market leader, right? And long ago, they kind of set out in this case study method. They produce cases for, right? It's like a big industry for them. They'll make these cases and sell them to other business schools, other education programs,
right,
et cetera. And other schools will do it like Darden. And what the cases are is they're basically like, hey, here's a business problem, right? Here's the story. Here are a bunch of the financial metrics, and it'll be on something that's already occurred. So, and what it does is you give them to, you'll have them in class, and you'll discuss them, and people will go and they'll do write-ups on them, they'll do analysis on them, and you'll discuss it in class, and people will present them. And it's a way to try and train people to think strategically about business problems, right? And they'll be integrative, right? They'll cover kind of multiple different things that'll be going on, like from a business standpoint, right? It's be like financials, operations, HR, strategy, leadership, et cetera. And the point is to not, have people walk out of business school where like I could be a CEO, because nobody can do that. Though some people do go start companies. The point is to give people kind of like a schema or a framework in their head to be able to go and approach business problems in a strategic manner, which is really the point of going to an MBA. Like the point of going to an MBA is to kind of gain that framework and network, so you can then step out into the business world and start to be effective and make a difference and make money. So, but this COVID-19 case study, right? Yeah. I mean, there's also like very challenging stuff for corporate America, all sorts of things they, never had to realize or approach. Right. And it would be really valuable. What were some of the things they talked about in here? His tech and operations management class considered how the company could offset the cost of clinical. Oh yeah. So they're saying the main focus here was, hey, you're like you're the leadership team at one of these pharmaceuticals, right? Do you take government money or do you not take government money, and you're trying to develop the vaccine?
Right.
And here's like the pluses and minuses. Very large strategic, decision to make. And so then they talked about, the pluses or minuses of that. And it was based on a real life case study of Merck and Co. So they didn't accept funding from Operation Warp Speed to develop a vaccine, but got 38 million in May from a branch of the Department of Health, right? Other drug companies took the federal money. And there's also other case studies where they have, hey, let's do a deep dive into how companies like Zoom and Airbnb rapidly shifted their marketing strategies to appeal to customers during the COVID era, right? Airbnb had to do Airbnb's whole model got disrupted, right?
Right.
It's like nobody's going anywhere. And so in the course of I remember reading about this last year, in the course of 7 to 8 weeks, they did a shift from, hey, we, here's, rentals in big cities, right, to here's cabins and stuff by the beach and all this other stuff. And they had a killer year, right? So of course it's going to get picked up and turned into a case study, because that's an example of when you think of strategy, right, that's an example of executing strategy at a corporate level that business school students would benefit from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing I want to touch on, and as we're talking about this topic, is, if you are someone who is thinking about going to business school, one of the things that people overlook very often is, what is the actual academic and teaching environment at your school like? Like, what does being in the classroom look like? Like, how does the interaction happen? Here, I really think it's just Darden and HBS that do like 100% case method. And I'll say, from, being a start, it's not 100% case. There's like some days where we're kind of doing something a little different. Might be like running a simulation or something, whatever, but it's overwhelmingly the case method. And it's a very different learning environment, because like, you as a student have to show up having like actually read the case, because it's really like the students that kind of lead the academic experience that's happening in the classroom, versus other schools where it's a little more like lecture based. But the point being there is, like, as you're looking at schools, understand what the classroom looks like, because that'll affect like what your entire experience at that school is like. And that's not something like, you can't get that from looking at the rankings. You can't get that from, just looking at the glossy brochures or something. But as you're talking to students at that school, start talking about that and getting a feel of what that experience is like, because it's an important part of
Yeah.
the journey.
All schools are different, right? Like
Yeah.
my school, Tepper, was very focused on doing a lot of like math and analytical and quantitative stuff, right? So they that was kind of how they sold their brand. But other schools aren't like that. So you really should talk to folks and try to get an understanding of what, because hey, you're gonna spend $200,000 on something, right? You should do a little due diligence.
Right. Right. Don't just look at the rankings and choose your school based off that. All right. So the next story we're going to be looking at is titled "A 43.4% capital gains tax, question mark. Make that more like 55% if you live in New York or California." So there is I know the Biden administration is pushing to significantly raise the federal tax on capital gains. And there's a lot going on here.
They're not going to get a 43.4%.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
They're going to get a watered down version of it. But what is this talking about, right? So let's talk about what capital gains taxes is, right? Because if you're just kind of Joe Blow, military guy, you this isn't probably something you think about, right? Because probably most of your income comes from what we would call W-2 income. And what that means is, when you get the U.S. looks at income in a couple different ways, right? There's income you get from working, right? Active income, so W-2 income, right? Or 1099 income, which would be a contractor, or like a self-employed. And then there's investment income. The U.S. charges a higher tax rate on income that you get from work, because they want people to make investments. They want people to pump money into our capital market system, so companies can access it and then use that capital to grow the economy, right? And so the tax code favors long-term investing. So if you make $100,000 off of income from working during the year, and then you make another $100,000 of income in, say, like appreciation or dividends, et cetera, the government is going to tax that $100,000 that you made in investments at a lower rate than what you'd get taxed at for your taxable income. What Biden is saying is he wants to tax people, very wealthy people, not the average person, but very wealthy people who earn more than $1 million, the personal income tax rate. And a lot of you may scoff at that, but you would be surprised, right? You would be surprised, especially with people who either own businesses or work in the tech industry.
Yeah.
How much money some of these folks make. I know people that make over $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I don't make over $1 million a year. I wish I did. Maybe one.
But you're right. It's sometimes we think that it's just C-suite level executives or something, but a lot of times it's small business owners who have like just a really successful business, and like they're just crushing it.
Yeah. I mean, you would be surprised, right? There's you can often get trapped in the military. You just don't have kind of this broader view of what's going on out in the world. And there are people who clear $1 million a year easy, and God bless them. So currently he wants to raise this from so what do you say? The leakers told Bloomberg that Mr. Biden will tax capital gains for taxpayers who earn more than $1 million at the personal income tax rate, which he also wants to raise to 39.6 from 37%. Now, here's where it starts to get crazy. You add in the 3.8% Obamacare tax on investment, you'll get to 43.4. And that's just the federal rate. So already the federal rate, if they're taking half of that,
Right.
And they say add in 13.3% in California and 11.85% New York, plus 3.88% New York City, which also tax capital gains as regular income, and you're heading towards the 60% rate range. And what I'm wondering is this I'm wondering if what I don't see in this and what I would need better clarity on is this the marginal tax rate, which is basically everything you earn up to like $1 million gets taxed at a different rate. And then past that is when
another tax rate kicks in.
Is when another tax rates. And so every dollar after that gets taxed at a different tax rate, right? Because if it's saying like, hey, if you earn $1 million, like we're gonna like
just take half.
That would
whoa. Yeah.
Pitchforks in the street.
Yeah.
So, my personal opinion is I think tax rates should be fairly low, right? What he views this as, they want to, fund a bunch of different, programs, right? This is always the, Democrats kind of, hey, we want to tax rich people, but they often sometimes tax middle-class people to fund, social programs, right? So this is a pretty wild, pretty wild proposition. Like I said, I doubt they'll get to it, but you never know. It's always about just kind of like trying to hit a single and then get on base and then hit it and then get on second base, right, to raise the tax rate even more. But it would the stock market did not like this, right? But
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem to be aligned to any type of like the right incentives of like what they're trying to get people to do. It's just we got to take some money from somewhere. Let's just do this, right?
Yeah.
And I personally am like much more on the side of, we need taxes to raise money to do things as a government, but let's have those taxes aligned to like incentives that we also want to create like a certain type of, behavior or action from the people who are receiving said tax. Right. So with like investment tax, for example, that's why the short-term capital gains tax is higher than the long-term capital gains tax, because we want people to keep their money in the market longer. So that companies have that money to work with versus, just day trading or something and you're just skimming some money off the top. Like that's why those tax structures are different, because the government is trying to incentivize a certain type of behavior.
Yeah, the argument always comes down to who do you think is going to be more efficient with your money or know how to put it to better use, you or the government, right? And that's, like freedom is not like a linear line,
right?
Like no tax is a complete freedom and, 100% taxation, no freedom, but a utopia, right? It's kind of it's a curve, right? And we as a society have to figure out where we want to fall in that curve. But hey, this is what you get when you have a president who's from the Democratic Party, right? Like this is, the elections have consequences.
I think one of my favorite quotes from this thing was where down at the bottom it says that Bernie was saying that Biden is going to be like the most left-wing president that we've ever had, and it's like now like, hey man, like Bernie actually might be right here. Like this stuff's going down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason Biden, I try not to get too into politics, right?
Right.
There's a reason Biden was able to vanquish Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the Democratic primaries, right? Because there was Democrats recognized, and quite rightfully, that if they elected Bernie Sanders to be or they nominated Bernie Sanders to be the nominee for president, that, I mean, like you're doing the Republicans' job for you, right? So if you're able to then have a guy who's more appealing to kind of middle America, right, and then can enact some left-wing policies, right, they'd be able to beat Trump versus having this crazy socialist from Vermont who is very easy to would be very easy to run against, right? So that was always the Biden argument, the use case for him being president was, hey, I can do left-wing policies, but I'll still appeal to the
Right.
vast majority of Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Before Colin and I go down a political rabbit hole, we're going to move to the next story, the next and last story, which is titled, my computer's freezing out on me, how a wave of electric trucks could create millions of, quote, accidental environmentalists.
Yeah.
So I know I've looked into this in one of the cases that we did here at Darden, and kind of generally what this thing is talking about is that it's really talking about consumer behavior. And lots of people have gotten electric vehicles and green vehicles and everything, all because they're dedicated to trying to save the environment. And there's lots of people who are like, yeah, I like the idea of doing that. I like the idea of not sending more CO2 onto the atmosphere, but also I don't want to be inconvenienced by this thing. And so like I'm just going to buy a regular car because it does what I need it to do, and I don't care like that much about it. But we're seeing some brands and some car makers find like these, open up like the spectrum of what can be an electric vehicle. Notably, like Hummer is entering into that market, and now like it's starting to appeal to people who weren't going to go buy a Prius, but now like they're like, yeah, sure, I'll buy an electric Hummer, I'll buy an electric F-150, like that fits like what I need it to do, while also doing this thing which I feel okay about. But before, it wasn't enough of a jump for me to want to cross that threshold of action, right? So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff to dig into here.
I've got to send you this video, Mark, of this electric Hummer. It's advertisement that I saw for it, and in it, the car, or the car, can you call a Hummer a car?
Yeah.
The truck or whatever, the large SUV that it is, it's going up on a mountainous road, and it gets to kind of like a junction, like that's really tight, like there's there's like a big rock sticking out, right? And it would be hard for them to navigate. So this Hummer, right? There's like a mode, this electric Hummer mode, that it'll like all turn the wheels in one direction, and you got to realize it can do this, right? Because it doesn't have like a gearbox or a drivetrain. So it turns all the wheels in one direction, and it crab walks, right? So
get the fuck out of here.
I'll have to send it to you. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And so yeah, like it goes like
what? Yeah, that's nonsense.
Yeah, so you're gonna see electric vehicles can do all sorts of cool stuff.
That is wild.
Simply because they don't have some of the mechanical limitations that other cars do. But yeah, like this article speaks to me, and I think I picked it because I want to kind of create the idea of what it's going to take for mass adoption of electric vehicles, right? So right now, if I hop in my Tesla and I go and drive somewhere that requires me to stop at a supercharging station, if I get out at these supercharging stations, everybody who's at the supercharging station looks like me, right? Which is some like yuppie looking dude, which is I think what I'm just going to start calling myself, who clearly, I mean, we all look the same. Like literally, like this is the same sort of people, right? Like this is the customer base for it. Yeah. But you need to have electric vehicles to really. I need my neighbor across who I'm looking at right now with his F-150, who has a dog kennel in the back because he'll take the dog hunting. Right. Like like if you're gonna really want this to be mass market, he needs to have it. Right. And so all these companies jumping in. You're going to start to see this over the next few years. All these companies are going to have it. I mean, the Tesla Cybertruck was just, that's just like the icing on the cake. But you're going to have F-150s, you're going to have Hummers, you're going to have all this stuff, right? And it's going to be people who don't look like me, who aren't like some, yuppie, right? Right. And instead, you're going to have like some dude with a cowboy hat who, I don't know, voted for Trump or something. Right.
Like the exact like customer profile that they described in this article is this guy who has a business. I don't want to call it a small business because it seems like more like a medium-sized business, but it's something in oil and gas. One of those companies like you're never going to hear about, but I'm sure this guy is probably in that bucket of clearing like $1 million a year easily. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He'd get hit by the capital gains tax.
Right. Like this is a guy who cares about the Biden tax plan. Okay. But like he's a Texas oil man. Okay. And he's a millionaire. This dude doesn't, and he's like, I'm not gonna buy a Tesla. That sounds like some hippie yippie shit, man. I don't want that.
Yeah, some California nonsense.
Right.
You
He's
made
like,
up.
but you give me 1,000 horsepower electric Hummer. Yeah, all right, I'll do that.
Yeah.
That'll work for me. Like that fits my brand of who I am as a person.
Yeah, it's when you think about when major societal achievements have happened, right? A lot of it has people say, oh, the free market will do it, right? Oftentimes it's a public-private partnership at the very beginning to kind of get everything going, right? Electric cars have been subsidized for years. The Tesla's no longer subsidized because there's so many of them now. Like when like they tried to, you can go back as far as like when the US was trying to settle the West, right? They were giving away land. They were trying to provide federal and state support for people trying to go out there. So the idea that there's some inflection point, right? Where the market can finally take over, where the incentives make sense is kind of like, that's where some people think we're at right now. And I think it's going to happen, like, because the large market, the SUV market for the US is huge, right? It's like the biggest market, because if you go to like Europe or anything, the people are just always kind of amazed at the size of our cars over here.
Right.
But Americans like big cars, right? So if you're able to break into that segment and really start to have these electric vehicles out there, it's just a matter of time, in my opinion. Like there's like we've reached the inflection point. But
yeah, I very much agree with you. Very much agree with you. All right, y'all. That wraps up the show for the week. That was the last story of the day. Just a reminder to everyone, if you are enjoying the show, please leave a review. We've gotten a bunch of really good reviews recently. So thank you for everyone who's left that. It helps other people find the show. And I know like we're branching out to like beyond just veterans and everything. So it's kind of a cool intersection of folks that are listening to the show. So we appreciate everyone, who listens. Please subscribe, leave a review. Kyle, you got any last things you want to say before we close out?
I'm going to be on the road for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to Austin on Tuesday for work. So expect a lot of influencer travel stuff on my story, right?
Lots of good Tesla videos.
Yeah. No Tesla videos, right?
Excuse me.
Because
okay.
I will be flying there.
Gotcha.
You'll get if you follow the SITREPs had kind of like two epochs, right? Like the first one was like pre-COVID, and the second one was like post-COVID. And the pre-COVID stuff, there was a lot of typical like traveling, and that stuff is just easy to do, right?
Yeah.
So this will be a return to my roots. And then I have to fly to Austin on Tuesday. I'm going to be there till Friday. I'm going to fly from Austin to Orlando, and we're going to go to Disney World with some of our friends from Chicago.
Oh, awesome.
So I'm going to be pretty exhausted by the time I get back.
Yeah.
But yeah, please rate, review, spread the word. We're really enjoying doing this, and I hope everybody has a great week.
Yeah. All right. Take care, y'all.